Well, welcome. I'm Perry Williams, and this is Hamilton County Newsmakers. Been off a couple of weeks, been down south, but I'm back now, and I have a special guest here today, Deputy Mayor Steve Cooke. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Perry. Appreciate having me on today.
Thank you. A lot of things going on in Noblesville, but one of the things that's kind of pushed a hot button, you might say,
Right.
in Noblesville and the Fishers area is the Nickle Plate Trail. Let's talk a little bit about that and how the conversation started and go from there.
Sure. So in terms of how we started to think about the Nickle Plate in terms of maybe converting it to a trail, well, it really all began last year, and I think everybody in Noblesville kind of followed that story when the train was shut down, was no longer able to operate for safety concerns, some concerns about potential mismanagement of the operator. So that really led the city to start to look at that corridor with fresh eyes. So if you had asked me like a year ago, would we be here today talking about this? We really wouldn't. I don't think anyone imagined that would have happened, but when it did and we started to look at it with fresh eyes, we started to think, what is the best use, for this corridor? What is the best use of the corridor in terms of how does it support the immediate area around the tracks, whether it's rail or trail? What would be the best use of the corridor in terms of how do we manage our city growth? And then I think the third thing we asked is what would be the best use of the corridor in terms of how do we connect our residents, but then how do we connect to other cities and towns like Fishers or Cicero.
Okay, now the one thing we want to talk about here is I want to make sure that everyone understands, the train is ran from Noblesville all the way down to the fairgrounds and those different type of things ran all the way up to Tipton.
Right.
So let's talk about the Nickle Plate Trail and what area we're specifically talking about at this time.
Right. Yeah, so with Fishers and Noblesville, we came together and announced on February 28th our proposal to convert about 9.2 miles of the tracks. So that would be from 96th Street all the way up through Fishers, across 146th Street, and then up through Noblesville. We actually decided to cut it off at Pleasant, simply because just beyond that, a little bit north, the train tracks go into the street, and there's really not enough room to convert to a 14-foot wide trail north of there. We could still see improving the sidewalk going north, but we felt it made sense to come up to Pleasant Street because then we'll also have the connectivity with the future Midland Trace Trail. So that seemed like a good termination point for that trail. We did think, does it go further north? Do we go beyond downtown all the way up to Cicero? But really in terms of our planning, we want to let the Port Authority time to look at maybe a new operator, get their RFP out for another operator. Do the northern towns want to see the train continue? So we don't want to make that decision really without understanding what they would want to do. So that's why we said, let's just stop it at Pleasant Street. That still allows the opportunity for the train to run north of downtown.
Now, we're talking about the trail stopping there at Pleasant Street and everything, but we do have a trail that would not take much of a connection between Noblesville and Cicero as it's set up, because I know that Cicero has done a lot of work coming this way, and we've done a lot of work going their way.
Exactly.
But it's not connected. It's right about where the school is, where our middle school is, I believe, west.
Yeah, so there could be a couple potential points going north without using the tracks. Okay. Our levee trail, which we're going to start construction on this summer, I don't know the exact route, and that's one thing we need to do. We need to get a map done in the city with all these new trails that are coming on, and not even without the Nickle Plate, looking at the Midland Trace, the Little Chicago Road Trail, and the levee trail. Where are the points of connection around the city and to something like Cicero? So that's why we were comfortable with the other trails coming on. We could potentially stop at Pleasant, and it's going to have its connectivity with Midland Trace, which would connect with then the Riverwalk to take us up to the Greenway Trail and the Pocket Park in that area.
A lot of the opposition, and of course I've been gone and only read what I've read in the paper and have not sat down and talked to people who are very, very closely connected to it, but you were saying the Port of Florida is still looking for possible. Now, would this trail, would we still do it, or would it not be? Or?
Yeah, so the Port Authority put out an RFP for a new operator actually just last week, and they have they've set the RFP up to where the folks who would propose a new operation could be anywhere on that corridor. It could be the section that we hope it would be, which would be, you know, from north of downtown all the way up to Tipton, or they could propose something for the entire corridor.
Okay.
So then it'll be a matter of the Port Authority getting those responses back, and then they would work with the owners of the line, which are Noblesville Fishers in the county, and we can participate in that process to interview the potential new operator, to have that discussion, what makes sense. And really during that time, we're also going to be pursuing the rail banking program with the federal government. That's what allows us to convert from rail to trail, so that eventually someday, if rail's determined like that's the best use, in the future we could go back to rail or maybe even transit. And that process in itself takes like 6 to 10 months. So it could be a long time before we even know we have an approval on that. In the meantime, the Port Authority is already going to have their operator selected.
Okay, I mean, that explains it a little bit better than some of the things that I had read before. Now, as far as the rail and the trail, is there any possibility of having both?
Yeah, that's been one thing that we've considered early on. I had heard some conversations or read a report that's from the Rails to Trails Conservancy that's specifically about rails with trails. And when we had our public meeting in March, you know, the first thing I took away is, like, when they're all holding up signs, rails with trails, I at least took away that everyone likes trails. So I'm glad that we're all having that conversation, that everyone sees the benefits of trails. But the idea of rails with trails is difficult for this corridor, because if you look at how wide we have, it's about 14 to I believe 50 feet wide. Okay. Really no more than that. And the federal, I believe, Highway Administration has said that the average corridor width is about 126 feet. Now that means there are some that are more than that, and that there also means some that are less. So, but we only have, no kidding, 14 to 50 feet to work with. So what can we do within that width? You know, one thing that I had done is I went out and walked part of the corridor, especially the bridge over Allisonville Road. So we've got the rail bridge there that we would convert to a trail bridge, and you can see that bridge it's not very wide. So that would mean having to add on an additional bridge next to it. And we have a few points like that where we would have to build another bridge next to it if we have both side by side.
Okay.
Stony Creek is another. There are a few culverts in that area south of Carbon Street where we'd have to build an additional bridge to accommodate both uses. I've heard estimates so much that would triple the cost of the trail. So it's very expensive. It's difficult to do given our terrain. We're also looking at that area between the Wellington neighborhoods, Stony Creek Business Park. If you're talking about, depending on how much width you want to take to do both, now you're going to have to acquire property. You're going to wipe out tree lines, buffers. You've got an
added expenses.
Yeah, so there's an added expense, and I don't think folks are going to want to see their trees get taken down or want to give up parts of their backyard. So we've looked at railway trail. We think the cost is pretty prohibitive. We think the terrain has limitations on being able to do that anyway. So that's why when we say we can have the best of both worlds, the trail running south from Pleasant and then the train running north from downtown, we mean that we could have both. And that's a pretty special thing. When you look at Hamilton County, they don't have that in the other cities. We can have both a train and a trail, just not side by side.
Okay. You know, the one thing with a lot of controversy and everything, and you know, a lot of things have been brought up about, you know, the concerns of some of the things that go on in the Modons, some of the crime and stuff like that. What are some of the things we'll be looking at? I'm sure you'll be addressing those type of issues, and you know, it looks like this program may be a few years down the road, even to get started. Yeah. So there may be a lot of new technology out there. It may be an unfair question to ask you.
Not at all.
What some of the precautions we're going to take.
Yeah, and we're fortunate that we've got, our Noblesville Police Department very interested in looking at trails. Given that we were going to go into construction on the Midland Trace Trail, they were already thinking ahead on that. So if you look, a few years down the road with the nickel plate, what will we have in place by then? Well, we look at design features of trails. How much visibility is there for police to be able to look at a trail from their patrol car? And we think that the nickel plate, there's a lot of points where just pulling up, through the neighborhoods or through Stony Creek Business Park, where they can see the trail from their police cars. But even more than that, last year we worked with council to budget for this year an enhanced bike patrol program with Noblesville Police Department.
And I saw that.
Yeah.
That'll be a great program.
Absolutely, because there are some trails that you're just not going to be able to see from a patrol car. So then that way we can get police out on the trail on their bicycles, riding in pairs, to patrol those trails when they're open. So that's those considerations were already in place. Obviously that'll continue if and when we would build a nickel plate. But then really involving the police when we're designing trails so that to make sure that we are ensuring safety. We've talked about whether it would be open at night or would there be lights. So right now with the Midland Trace, we're still trying to finalize that, but we're really leaning towards keeping this a dusk to dawn trail. There probably would not be lighting because we don't want people to have that feeling of safety maybe when it's technically not open. Some trails do have the phone system set up, but they don't often work. They could short out. So we're looking at, people have cell phones. They just need to know where they're at on a trail. So if something should happen, they know the marker that they're near that they could call, for help. In addition to that, I think one thing that will help is public education. So when most crime is associated with trails are at trailheads. So you have people parking their cars. So it's educating people to hide your valuables, lock your vehicle. So taking some precautions and using your own common sense so that you're not inviting crime. But at the same time, beyond that, I think it's also a matter of just making sure people are aware of their surroundings. And then when we look at crime on trails, we've talked to police departments regionally, and they really haven't seen any kind of uptick in crime related to residences. And they think that's due to most of the time there are a lot of people out on trails anyway, which is going to deter crime in itself. But then there's sort of a misperception about crime where criminals don't generally come up to areas that they don't know. So we don't see them coming up to Noblesville and committing a crime because they don't really know the area. So they think about, how do I get away? Where are my escape routes? If they don't know the area, they typically aren't going to come to our community to start committing crimes. So we feel comfortable that we'll have a police presence and they're going to be a part of this whole design process going forward.
And that's great. And let's face it too, that Hamilton County is, knock on wood, very blessed to not have a very high crime rate the entire county. So,
absolutely.
So that's a positive thing. Like we can't predict, we don't know what's going to happen down the road.
Sure.
But that sounds like something that is kind of taken care of. Mm-hmm. What about, obviously, the one thing that I've learned over my years being associated with towns and cities and being a past director in Tennessee of a Main Street, one of the things that I know from going to national conventions, many of us my age, many people think that it's a perk to have trails in the community. But with the millennium people coming along and everything, it's a necessity now. I mean, it is a different lifestyle, okay? And people are very health conscious. Right. And it's a positive thing when you're trying to expand industry in your area. Absolutely.
And a lot of folks are comfortable going over to Carmel, and getting on the Monon there. So they've kind of seen that. And if you've done that, you see people of all generations, which is cool to see that they do appeal to people of all ages, young, above, north. And I think that's a great thing to bring people together. And one thing that I've worked on with mass transit, when I worked on that, we really dug into the data to see that millennials a lot of times choose where to live first and then go to find a job later.
Which is totally
Yeah.
different than the way I was
Right.
brought up.
And myself, too.
Yeah, I mean, you took a job as you went
Yeah.
and found a job,
Uh-huh.
and then you moved to that area. But it's not that way anymore.
That's right. So what amenities appeal to that generation? We definitely see where trails do appeal. So what, the redevelopment we've seen around the Monon and Carmel and Westfield and Indianapolis with the cultural trail, young people just kind of expect that. That's why we have to be making, these decisions now within our cities to be able to address that and bring that need. I mean, we have a lot of trail miles within Noblesville, but I think the Nickle plate would be completely different than what we've had before. Being 14 feet wide compared to most of our trails, it's a lot wider. You can accommodate more people.
Well, I think Indianapolis is facing that evolution down there now. Is they're taking a look at part of the Monon,
Yeah.
making it wider.
Oh, yeah.
To make sure that people have room to walk, to
Right.
bike, to
Right.
skate, whatever. I mean, so there's many different ways today that people, the old trail days of just getting out there and walking on a trail and is totally different. If you go to the Modown, and just like you said,
Yeah.
you learn from over there. So with this being 14 foot wide,
Yeah.
it should accommodate every way of transportation as far as
Yeah.
foot traffic and
Right.
bicycling and
Well, you bring up, a good point there. One section I love of the Nickel Plate corridor is just south of Pleasant. I mean, you look at that area; it's got a huge easement, and that's one of the things we look for. And we're like, what's possible around that? If it's a trail someday, what's possible around that? Kind of cool ways to celebrate art and history and culture that we can do along there. Kind of similar to the cultural trail in Indianapolis. What could we do there? So I think that's like one of the coolest features that we see with the Nickel Plate that we could do there. But certainly, having enough room so you can accommodate bikes and people rollerblading and walking, pushing a stroller, so we can kind of all fit on there.
let's face it, that a southeast area of this county is getting pretty populated with young millennial type people
Yeah.
that enjoy that type, and especially when you ride out in that area, in the Fishers area and around that area, you see a lot of people walking the sidewalks, bicycling, kids on bicycles out in front of the parents who are jogging along. So it's a great atmosphere. Pets, just the great atmosphere that it has.
Yeah.
with it.
And and talking to some of the folks who live in the neighborhoods around the Nickel Plate, we're starting to do that more now. That's one of their concerns, is not being able to have good connectivity with downtown. I mean, you can't ride a bike up 10th Street. It's pretty hard to do. So, in fact, when I was walking on the tracks that one weekend when I crossed over the Allisonville Road Bridge, I came across a family that was walking back from downtown on the train tracks.
Really?
And I didn't tell them I worked for the city. I just said, "Hey, did you hear about this idea of converting to a trail?" And they said, "Yeah, they did hear it." And I was kind of wondering what this was going to be like, what they were going to say. And they just, "I love it. I can't wait to see it. This will be wonderful to be able to get on the trail and go to downtown." So that was at least heartening to hear. I think there's a lot of different viewpoints out there, and that's we're trying to reach everybody now to hear, what they want to see for that corridor, kind of take in everybody's feedback.
Yeah, the one thing that we got here, let's kind of go over a little bit.
Sure.
I know we've touched on it, but I want our viewers to understand that this plan that you put together and introduced, what was the date?
We proposed it on February 28th with City of Fishers.
Yeah, that this is not a plan that's going to happen tomorrow.
Oh, no.
But it's something that has to be discussed. Best scenario, worst scenario, what are we talking about time frame wise?
Well, I think time frame wise, so we're collecting that feedback now. We'll likely submit for a federal application for that federal rail banking program in the next couple months. During that time, we'll continue to collect feedback. We'll work on revising our budget estimates because we think we can bring the number down. But let's say we even got that approval within 2 months or 3 months. It doesn't bind us to doing anything with the tracks at that time. We can continue to have this discussion, figuring out, is this really the best use of the corridor? And then it's really up to each city how they want to try to fund this. And that's when we would go to our city councils to ask them. Noblesville, we do have a good, robust trail system. We don't want to take any money away from our current trails that we're funding, Midland, Levy, Little Chicago. We've got the Riverwalk completing this summer. So how do we fund this? We will likely submit for federal funding, which would bring our commitment down even further, but then that would also put out any construction until maybe 2023. So we're still trying to figure that out, whether that's the route we go. That could potentially be one. So people are going to have time to kind of calibrate for this change. And we'll continue to look for federal opportunities to get grants. And if there's a way to start that construction sooner, we certainly will. What the city of Fishers will do will depend on their needs. I see them being probably proposing this to fund it more, to get it built more quickly, which makes sense. And eventually we can hopefully bring the two communities together in the middle on 146th Street.
Sounds good, sounds good. Well, the one thing about it is I really appreciate you coming on here today. And I want to make sure to everyone that Deputy Mayor Cooke reached out to me to come on the show here and talk a little bit about some of the things we're going. Did we miss anything that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I think I think the main thing, it's hard when you're looking at something like this that is different from what we've had before. I'm not born and raised in Noblesville. I've lived here for 16 years. So I've seen some comments out there like, how could you do this and take away our history? And I mean, it's a difficult decision. It really is to look at the nickel plate. But we do believe wholeheartedly in being able to have both. A lot of that's going to depend on the Port Authority and the proposals for that new operator to run north. So we're looking at this, and let's not think about what the nickel plate's been. What could it be? It could be even better, maybe just going north, up to Tipton maybe, and that's different. And I know that kind of worries people, but I do think we can preserve that historical element and that amenity for folks who want to do that train. But then if you look going south, how do we manage our city's growth? It's hard to talk with people about traffic numbers and population, but the fact is we have grown so much over the years where 146th Street on its own has 40,000 cars a day going by. Do we really want to introduce more trains running across there and stopping traffic? Is that really what we want to do? But so we have to take that kind of into consideration. I know that's not fun, but that's the kind of thing the cities have to consider. So how can we look to have a train in the future, but then still manage our growth? And that's why we felt like to the south the trail and to the north the train would work well.
Yeah, I think the one thing, there was obviously a lot of emotion early on, and it is a lot to swallow. Okay, right. But like you said, it's a lot of things that you have to look at as government to keep progressing in this county, because let's face it, we're on a fast track here. Okay, and that window of opportunity could pass very, very quickly. Right. So we have to be prepared for that. But we also got to keep in mind on this rail situation, the train's great. I have great memories, my kids do, of riding that train when they were little down to State Fairgrounds. Yeah. And those were in the Polar Express and those type of things. But we gotta remember as a community, that's a lot of real estate to keep up just to use for a few times a year. Sure. So we have to think, hopefully, and I'm sure the Port Authority has that in mind, that track has got to be utilized, okay? Yeah. I'm not saying every day or any type of program like that, but it's got to be utilized year-round. And so those are some of the things that we got to take care of and take a look at, and the masses that are coming in this town. One of the things that I would like, Mayor Cooke, and Deputy Mayor Cooke, as you mentioned earlier, about all the trails that we have going on here and how you'd like to get a map going and things like that. If you would like, feel free to, we can book a show some other time and come back and let's talk a little bit about the levee trails and a little bit more about and how we're going to how this big plan, this big scheme of this beautiful park that trails that we're talking about, how they can be beneficial and how we're going to put this all together and for a great Noblesville and a great Hamilton County.
I appreciate that, Perry. Absolutely. I'd love to come back on. And that's really what this is about. Some folks say we have enough trails. I don't agree. I think the more trails, the better, because then we can bring more connectivity to more neighborhoods, for more people, and you'll be able to connect with the other trails that are already in construction. So yeah, I'd love to come back on and talk about that some more.
Yeah, because I think, and of course, you know, I've spent several years in this community, left, came back, so I've seen a lot of different things. But the one thing that we have a problem with here, and I can say this because I was born and raised here, okay, is putting boundaries on ourselves, okay? And a perfect example is our White River, okay?
Right.
It is not a boundary. It's an asset.
Absolutely. Okay?
And to expand out and to get to these other areas, I think that's a positive thing, and that's a kind of an elevator speech from me, Perry Williams, on that. And people who know me know I feel that way. That yes, downtown Noblesville, in my mind, is the root of this community, but those roots have to grow to expand for that tree to get taller.
That's a good way to put it, Perry. I couldn't agree more.
And those things have to happen, and there's a lot of good things going on here, and sometimes old emotion we got to embrace. And feel free. I mean, you know, contact me if you're interested in talking the other side on the tracks, because it's important to us as a community, and I want everybody to agree. I appreciate you guys listening to some of the comments out there and do those things, and that's why I'd like to use this format here on Hamilton County Newsmakers to talk about, you know, there's been a lot of talk about the Levee Trail for a long time, even long before you. I have some good buddies that I eat lunch with. Go, we've been talking about that levee or the Midland Trail there. You know, okay, well, those are the things that are coming to tuition now, okay? And we're starting to get those done. So let's talk about them a little bit and let people know. And
absolutely. We need to beat our chest a little bit more because we have so much to be proud of in this community.
Absolutely. And I think a little plug here we got coming up this weekend is Federal Hill Commons, which is something, if you have not been there and you have not walked around that area, you need to get down there because it's not, it's very, very peaceful. It really is. And it's a bigger space than what you think, okay?
And the sound quality, I imagine.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, I stood up there on that stage, watching the trucks come by and not hearing them.
Isn't that amazing?
So it's really amazing. Yeah. And I appreciate what the city did of putting out that map and putting in the newspapers about parking places. Okay.
Yes.
Because I'm always one that, not very popular to say this, but I don't think Noblesville has a huge parking problem as much as they have a huge walking problem.
Right. Wait, that goes back to your health question.
Because I've been to the Hamilton Town Center, and I've been to malls all over the country. Yeah. And I've had to walk a little ways to get to a store. Right. So, and I think that we're starting to get things around here that it's worth walking to.
Absolutely. And somebody, I can't take credit for this, but somebody made the comment of, you drew a map of a parking lot to Walmart, that folks walk farther from the car to Walmart than you do to probably an awesome park like Federal Hill Commons or even downtown to a store. You know, we have a lot that's attractive that people want to come to. They might walk a couple blocks to get there. You know, that's okay.
Absolutely.
But we need to do our job as a city too to get that information out, and we have, you know, social media and our website, through the media, on where to park, and we've got police involved to help people, especially with this grand opening. With the event, this event being bigger, and some of the bigger events that are coming up, we'll definitely have a police presence to help, you know, people cross the street and to make sure they get there safely and can enjoy themselves, because it's going to be a great thing.
I want to say one thing about that too. I've spent the last few years being a part of probably the biggest event in Noblesville is the Noblesville Street Dance.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And your people do an outstanding job. I mean, your street department, your police department, your fire department, class one.
Absolutely.
They do an outstanding job. They're always willing to help there, and the minor things like the trash cans overflowing over there.
Sure.
Can the city people come and take
Right.
care of that trash?
Right.
Gets done right away. So
Yeah.
we're very, very blessed to
Yes.
have those type of people that believe in this community, and we want to continue to do that.
Yeah. Thank you.
So anytime you'd like to come on, and
Yeah.
we'll talk a little bit about this, and we'll talk about even talk about Finch Park a little bit as we get a little bit closer.
Right.
People are going to have to realize that when we announce things,
Sure.
it's not happening tomorrow.
Right.
But once you put those things back, you start getting the feedback and the feel of what the people really want in this community. And it's amazing how you get people excited and how people band together. And there's the funny thing about it, there was a lot of disagreement early, but I think there's some common ground that can be set up here if we work at it.
Well, it's having something tangible too, to look and see and to visit. If anyone did doubt Federal Hill Commons, I hope they come out this weekend, and anytime going forward, I think they're going to be blown away. And even with the Nickle plate, with this idea, which I know is difficult to consider, but I do think and believe that we're going to have a fantastic corridor, trail, and then rail in the future. So it's just a matter of being able to picture things and what they might look like when we don't have, a great rendering or to be able to visit something physically.
Yeah, and using the street dance again, that gives us an opportunity to expand even more, okay? And do more events, maybe more bands. I mean, more choices of types of bands to do. I know for many years when I lived in the Memphis area, and they have that Memphis in May, and all kinds of bands, barbecue festival, all those things. Each weekend in the month of May has a certain designated theme behind it. So those are kind of things that we can do here with all the great things we've got going.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll have to look into that.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on anytime, and feel free, people, if you have any questions or you would like to come back on and talk about the other side of this on the train side, I'd be welcome to come and we could talk about that. And also, if you have some questions that maybe people thought that I was a little soft on you today, go ahead and send you an email or send me an email.
Absolutely.
And we'll do this again if you don't mind. I mean,
I'll do this again. I'll meet with anyone over coffee. I mean, we do have a website out there about the Nickle plate. It's Nickle Plate Trail. Now I'm forgetting, nickelplatetrail.com.
Okay.
So we've got more information out there. You can always email me if you see my email address on the screen. Let me know if you have any questions. Like I said, I'm starting to meet with the residents and the different neighborhoods around there. I'm always open to feedback, and that's what this is all about.
Okay.
So
thanks a lot, Derek.
Thanks, Perry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'll see you next week.